The lazy summer sleep schedule that your family's gotten used to for the last few months is about to come to an end. It's back to school season. And if that scares the crap out of you because your kid has gotten used to like a 10 o'clock bedtime, today's episode where I interview Emily Oster is for you. Today, I'm so excited to be interviewing Emily Oster. She is a professor of economics at Brown University, and she's the best-selling author of books that we all have on our shelves, like Expecting Better and Crib Sheet. And she's also the founder of ParentData, which is an amazing community where she uses data to help reassure us parents that we're doing a better job than we think at raising our kids. We talk about the importance of routines for kids. We talk about sleep and school performance. We talk about screen time before bed. God, we cover so many things. And she even gives us like a really useful structure to be a little bit more intentional with our parenting decisions and really just decisions that can help improve the way our family runs. So let's jump in. All right. Well, welcome, Emily. Thank you so much for being on the show today. I'm excited to have you here.
I am delighted to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Okay. Well, sadly, summer is coming to an end and we're moving into this back to school season, which everyone, it's kind of mixed feelings going into this time of year for me, at least. I'm like kind of ready for the kids to go back, but at the same time, it's like back to the routines.
I'm ready.
Ready. Yes, that's a common sentiment. But, you know, whether it's families going back to daycare or preschool or elementary school, usually the fall is met with a need to bring some structure and routine back into our life that we have let go during the summer. A little more relaxed, sun is out, neighborhood barbecues, everyone stays up a little late, don't always have to get up and have somewhere to go in the morning. So fall is like, all right, we got to get this together. We got to get our family back organized and on a schedule, which is always a little bit challenging.
I agree, although I also think it's an incredible opportunity. Like maybe this is just growing up in like an academic family and teaching at a university, but I feel like the fall is this time to be like, yeah, like let's get it together and organize it. And this is a chance to achieve the thing that we want to achieve. And then it'll sort of melt a little bit until June.
Right. You kind of start off strong with like, yes,
start strong.
Let's do it.
Start strong.
Well, okay. So this is going to lead to my first question, which is I always say that, especially when it comes to like toddlers and preschoolers, I mean, I think personally all humans, but I feel like especially kids are such creatures of habit. And they really thrive on like routine and structure, and that it makes them feel like almost give them a sense of security that they kind of know what to expect, know what's coming next. So, you know, I wonder if data tells us anything about how important routines are for kids and families.
There are a tremendous number of areas of early parenting where we have evidence that a structure of parenting that relies on routines or consistency works really well. So bedtime, an example, we know that bedtime routines are like almost the first thing people will tell you is a good component of having a consistent bedtime because of what we see in the data. And then we look at things like discipline, we see that consistency is also the key there. And between that and just our general sense of out of the data about what makes for a sort of happy, structured home for kids, it is a lot of routine and consistency. And that doesn't mean you never have ice cream for dinner or stay up late for a barbecue. But if kids know what to expect, then those sort of outside things, you can have them without it disrupting everything. And I think in some ways the routine is the glue, is the core. And then you can occasionally pop things around on it, but that way they know what is coming.
Yeah. Sometimes I describe it like a rubber band where it's like you have to have a circle. You can stretch it, but then it comes back to its shape. You have to do the work to put in the consistency, the schedule, the routines, and you can bend and flex it, but ultimately the core is still there. Yeah.
Yeah. Kids are not, I mean, it's for better or for worse. Like kids are not that, like they're resilient. They can be flexible if they need to be, but they're not infinitely flexible. They like to know what is coming because it gives them a sense of control. It's like no person, but especially not kids, likes their life to be unpredictable and not to know what's going to happen in the next minute. Kids are like adults in that.
You're saying this and I'm like flashing back to March 2020, right? With like when COVID, like it doesn't feel good to not know what in the world is happening or what is going to happen. That doesn't feel good. We need those pieces of our lives to feel normal and regular. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so that's good to know that these things are actually important to kids and that it does go a long way. And I like how you mentioned like kind of discipline too, because it's knowing what to expect all the time. It's knowing what to expect from your parents' reaction, knowing what to expect if you misbehave in a way, and then also just knowing what to expect like when we eat dinner, like when we do bath, like that kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's just having a sense of what is coming so you know what the reaction is going to be, and you're not using those sort of amped up stress hormones to process things that are happening in every moment.
Yeah, because you can't really learn in those moments, right? That's always the recommendation is like, okay, the temper tantrum is happening. Like, it's just got to run its course.
Don't try to teach it now.
Yeah, can't fix it in the moment. Got to get ahead of it next time. That's the goal.
Yeah.
Okay, so as we're thinking about kind of getting back to our good fall routines, how long does it take to change up a routine? Do we know anything about that?
Not exactly. I mean, I think we have a general sense from, I mean, you know this from your work, but I think we have a general sense from how we try to change sleep routines and then how long it takes kids to adapt to a classroom routine, that kids are quite fast. They learn good habits fast, they learn bad habits fast. So, a week into a routine, like maybe the first couple of days are tough to get used to, but kids will learn that really fast. And sort of similarly, if you get out of the routine, they learn that real fast.
Yeah.
Real fast too. But we're not talking about setting up a routine and waiting 6 months or 3 months to see the fruits of that routine. You're talking about setting up a routine and seeing benefits of that 2 days later or a week later, kind of being in it.
Okay. Yeah. I was thinking like, I typically say like 5 days to like really see a change. Okay, so we need to kind of start thinking about what do we want our days to look like and our nights to look like for school season. Give ourselves a week to kind of get ahead of that and get everyone used to the new structure of how things are going to run.
And I think you would imagine if you're sometimes people say, okay, like the week before school, we're going to sort of try to start getting into the school routine. That seems sensible. You're going to need a week of school to actually be in the routine. You can't really replicate the routine without the actual school.
Right. Well, I think kids are like get so much more tired when they have school days too, right? I mean,
totally.
They're exhausted because no matter if you're in elementary school or still in preschool, like they've got your days like, you're going with all your friends and activities and way more than your parents are probably providing for you during the summer.
Yes. And for many of our kids, school asks a lot of their self-control relative to home. And so this is where I think having the routine so they know what to expect is so important when they are using their own self-control all day at school to like follow along what's going on. If you then get home and it's kind of chaotic, that's going to reinforce the fact that you're feeling exhausted and everything is feeling a little confused. If you get home and you're like, okay, but now I know I'm at home, I know what to expect. I'm going to have some quiet time. I'm going to, watch some TV. I'm going to have dinner. I'm going to go to bed. Like that's what I expect. I think that's particularly important when they're using all these other muscles, brain muscles at school.
Yeah. Or even physically like sitting still.
Right. Yes.
Listening to a story.
Like,
stay on your
not
square.
Using their muscles.
Yeah. Mental muscles.
Somehow.
Yeah.
Mental muscles, not physical muscles.
Yeah. So, okay. What do we know about how sleep affects school performance? Now, I have read and you've told me about a study that I think is absolutely fascinating about sleep and school performance. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So with young kids, I'm going to tell you about 2 studies. With young kids, my favorite of these is a study in which they had kids and they did sort of three different things, or 2 things that were treatments that were changes from their routine. So for a week, they asked their parents to keep them up just 1 hour later.
Every kid's dream.
Every kid's dream. Push bedtime an hour for like 4 days. And at the end of the week, you test them for cognitive performance. You ask their parents how they were during the week and get some information from their teachers. And just like the 4 days of 1 hour later, the kids are doing worse on the cognitive testing. Their parents say they're acting like jerks and their worst behavior metrics in school. So that's just an hour for a few days. And then, you get them like kind of back to normal. So that to me illustrates just how important a small amount of variation in sleep can be if it's not enough. And I think what's really relevant there is different kids need different amounts of sleep. So there is a lot of individual variation. So figuring out how much sleep your kid needs is an important part of this. But if you're at a place where they're getting enough sleep, they need that much sleep. Taking away an hour of it is going to make your kid do worse in school and act less good.
That is amazing.
It is amazing. We can do much more extreme versions of this with college students because you can do all kinds of crazy stuff. So they bring college students into a lab, they keep them up all night, and then they see what happens. And they do very poorly on their tests, but they say that that they do better. And that's for me, like when they ask the students, how did you do? They're like, I do great. But actually they do terrible.
I love that.
They did. So I think it's the whole thing there's so many pieces of data that you can pull on that suggest that sleep is important and not just kind of aggregately over, many years or whatever, which we also know, but like literally in the scale of a day or a week, you can really impact people's experience and their school performance.
That really brings it home because yes, I've heard about studies where, they track kids when they're young, when they're 3 or 4, and they track them when they're in kindergarten and first grade, and kids that are, chronically overtired, not getting enough sleep typically do worse. But that's, kind of a longer term study.
Problem.
But that's why this is so interesting where it's like, all right, 4 days, like.
Yeah, you can, and it doesn't mean you can't get it back from that, but it does really say like, you want to be thinking about this.
Yeah.
You want to be thinking about this.
Well, and it just shows the impact. It's not, it's not hard to understand. It's not like hard to comprehend or think, oh, maybe not my kid. It's like, okay, no, this is concrete. Okay, what do we know? What does any data show us about the effects of sleep deprivation on parents? Because we can see it, like we just talked about the study, that, it's very obvious how lack of sleep, even a little bit, can affect school performance. And I think as parents, when we have, kids who are not sleeping well, we can see it in their behavior, increased tantrums, being super clingy, just not being able to self-regulate. And I mean, at least for me, I get one night of bad sleep, my whole family's going to feel that. Like, that's not going to be good. But what does data tell us about like how it affects parents?
Yeah. So I think the most salient relationships here are with mental health. Lack of sleep is an incredibly significant risk factor for depression. And you can see this in studies of sleep training. So when we think about sleep training for little kids, people are very focused on like, is it going to damage my kid? And we've talked about this before. There's just really no evidence to suggest that it would. Many of the studies on sleep training are in fact focused as their outcomes on parental mental health. So there are studies where they bring parents into the lab for sleep training, and it's like 3 days in the lab. So one of these studies, like 3 days in the lab. At entry, 70%, and they're, just to be clear, they're bringing in people whose kids have a very significant set of sleep problems, so the parents are quite sleep deprived.
Yeah.
At entry in this study, 70% of the women are screening positive for depression on a depression screen. They're like 4 days in of basically a situation in which you're sleeping because your kid is sleeping.
Yeah.
They're down to 10%. So,
after 4 days.
Yeah, because it's like, and this from your lived experience. That's what's so powerful, I think, about the evidence on sleep is that it is not something that we have to kind of rely on. It's not that we don't have to rely on data. There's so much data, but we are able to experience these impacts ourselves so distinctly.
Yeah.
So when someone tells you like sleep, like not sleeping in a consistent manner makes you depressed, it's sort of like, of course. Yes, thank you. I know about that.
Yeah.
But we see it in the data also that for parents, kind of chronic sleep deprivation has quite significant mental health impacts. And then that has other impacts on our kids and on our functioning and all of the sort of the way that our family operates and how we do at our job and every other aspect of your life. When you're not sleeping, it's just everything is kind of blah.
Yeah. I say it's like a dark cloud. It's just like following you around. You're just like, ugh, like a wet blanket's on everything. Well, I think it's so interesting that how fast though that it can change.
But I think you can see how quickly this changes with sort of extreme kinds of sleep deprivation, even in the short run. Like think about the time surely your children have had a sleepover. Think about like one night or 2 nights of really disrupted sleep for some reason. There's a sick kid. There's a, you're already feeling, not depressed in like a clinical sense, but really like that sort of soft, dark cloud downness of just thinking like, I can't, it's just like hard to enjoy stuff because I'm just like flat.
Yes. Flat. That's a good way to put it. You're just surviving. You're just surviving. Yeah. And I think it also has a really profound effect on marriages too. I mean, certainly if one person or both people are sleep deprived, they're not bringing their best selves to the table. But then there's also, I see also too, a lot of conflict around like what to do to fix a kid's sleep problems. That can cause a lot of like marital issues too if you're not on the same page, and then a lot of it, sorry to be like stereotypical, but a lot of it does end up falling on the moms, and a lot of times it's dads looking to the moms like, what do you want to do? Like, what should we do?
Right. Yeah, and I think that would be okay if then when she was like, we're going to do this, everyone was following through on it. I think if it's like, what do you want to do? And then I was like, oh, I didn't want to do that. That's more of a problem. But you absolutely also see this marital satisfaction stuff in the data when we look at things like sleep training. That is another thing that sort of responds to better child sleep is parental marital satisfaction.
Yeah. Okay. So how much, I know that it can vary based on, different kids, but does data tell us kind of how much sleep kids need each night? I mean, I know what I kind of recommend, just want to make sure we're in line here.
So it's sort of something between 9 and 11 hours. I mean, it depends a little bit on the age, but sort of for like preschool, early elementary, I think we'd be looking at something like 9 to 11 hours, a lot of variation.
Yeah. That's what I say. I say 10 to 12. Same thing. I think 10 and a half to 11 and a half seems to be like where I feel like most 3, 4, 5-year-olds like really need to
I was thinking more when we sort of start pushing to like 8, kind of 6, 8, 10 when kids are in school more, like tightening around to, not like 9 and a half to 10 could be okay. Yeah. Depending on the kid. But it's a lot of sleep. I mean, I think that's when you sort of express that to people, I think and you then do the backing out from with the time that school starts to like when you need to go to bed. I think that's quite surprising for a lot of people. Yeah. And when we are talking about starting up in school, that's the thing I think parents need to sit down with, like, okay, my kid's going to have to get up at 6:30 so I can get them to school. And I want them to get 10 hours of sleep. That's like,
you're going to be asleep at 8:30. Yeah.
You're going to be asleep at 8:30, which means like for sure you're in bed at 8 and we're starting to wind down at 7:15 or something.
Yep, totally. Yeah, I mean, my 11-year-old, she still needs, she gets 10 hours of sleep a night. And it's really not okay if she gets 9. I mean, occasionally obviously that happens, but like, she doesn't like that either. She's like, I feel tired. I'm like, yeah. Because we were out late or whatever. Yeah. So it goes on for a while.
No, my 13-year-old, goes to bed at 9:30 and gets up at 7. And like, she needs that. Like, she needs that sleep. That's not like, we could not push that bedtime later.
Yeah. Well, you need to come to my house because that's a problem we're having right now because the lights off is supposed to be 10, but then like I'll come upstairs at 10:30 to go to bed and her light's still on and I'm like, ugh. And then she's always like, I'm tired. I'm like, I know. Please, I'm your mother. This is embarrassing. Turn your light off. But yeah, those sleep needs go on for a long time. Another thing that a lot of people have questions about are electronics and screen time and bedtime. So what does the data tell us about, I don't necessarily mean how much like each day or should kids have, but like how close to bedtime, like how big of a deal is that?
So I tend to be, just to be clear, because I'm going to say something negative about screens, I tend to be like, I am not a screen hater. My kids watch screens. I spend a lot of time telling people like some screen time is fine. Like all of these headlines about screen times when you're a kid, I think are basically just a bunch of correlations that don't have any meaning. But screens close to bedtime, and that by that I mean something like within an hour of bedtime, have been shown in studies to affect the quality of sleep. So basically you can sort of look at how much REM sleep, like sort of actually tracking how good is the sleep kids are getting, or people are getting, by the way, also it should be for you. Like how good is that sleep? And it is worse if there's screen times within an hour of bed. No. So
okay.
I don't think we should have screens that close to bedtime.
Okay. So, because what I've always heard is a little bit different, which is that the blue light can like suppress melatonin production. But I think, at least the way I've always perceived that information is that it's gonna prevent you from falling asleep as easily if you're watching TV before bed. But
that
you're actually
also there are both effects on the amount of sleep, and then I think there are also some effects, at least in some of these studies, on like the match between like REM sleep and deep sleep.
That's
and like
okay.
How much is that you're sort of have, and maybe it's in some ways the same thing, like you've sort of activated and then it's hard to fall asleep and then you don't have enough time to get into the or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So it's, I think, both a sleep quantity and a sleep quality issue.
Okay, interesting. So an hour. So you say an hour. All right. Well, that's the new rule. That's the new rule.
Ideally.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I am part of your ParentData community, which is wonderful. I hope everybody who's watching, listening is also part of this group because it's amazing. You've got answers and guidance for so many of the challenges that we face.
Hopefully.
On a wide variety of topics. And so I went in there and I was searching around for sleep stuff just to kind of see what you had out there about sleep. And I found this great article. This is a couple years old, but it was laying out a real clear process to help families solve some of the challenges in their house, whether they're related to sleep or even other things that they're dealing with. And so as we're getting into school season, I wanted to ask about this. So you call it's the 4 F's that you teach in your book, The Family Firm. And I have them here in case this is not top of your mind. I can kind of help you refresh your memory on this.
Okay.
But I think it's a really cool structure.
Yeah. So I talk about this. I talk about it in the context of sleep here. And I talk about these sort of tools in many decision-making spaces. So the first step, and everything starts with an F because you gotta, you
gotta have alliteration. What is life?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the first step is to frame the question. And that can mean a different thing depending exactly on what you're doing. So sometimes it's just like literally trying to be explicit about like, am I choosing between A and B, as opposed to just kind of saying vaguely, oh, I need to decide something about
we
sleep.
need to fix sleep.
We need to fix sleep.
Yeah.
Like we need to fix sleep is a very, very poor way to frame this because like, well, what would the answer be?
Right.
As opposed to saying, should bedtime be 7 p.m. or 8 p.m.? That's
right.
like a concrete
How
question.
can we get, right. Jessica and Emily said that Billy needs to be getting 10 hours of sleep and he's got to get up at 6:30. So how do we get him to bed by 7:30, whatever?
Right. So that's like, then just to really try to dial into like, what am I trying to accomplish with this? So, with this problem solving. Once you have settled that, then the question is like getting the data that you need in order to either make the decision or in order to make the decision or answer the question. And sometimes that would be data here, like, let me understand how many hours of sleep Billy needs, right? Okay. It's like Billy has to get up at 6:30. So one piece of data I need is like, how many hours of sleep does he need? Okay, it's 10. That's one piece of evidence. Then I can figure out what time he needs to go to sleep. Sometimes that data, and particularly in sleep, sometimes this fact finding is about figuring out what are the other logistics that we would need to think through to kind of answer this, to get to a solution to this. So in the case of sleep, sometimes when people sort of start putting this together and try to put it together in this deliberate way, you will find like, well, actually, like if we want him to be in bed at 8:30 and we're going to start bedtime, at 7:50, like maybe you need to eat at 6.
When do we eat?
How are we going to get, when do we eat? You sort of like back it out, or there's some extracurricular that gets in the way of that. So there's an opportunity to like get all of the constraints together at once in service of answering the question and really collect all the information that you need. The third step is called final decision. I try to tell people like, get all the information you need, figure out the question, and then sit down. And if there's another decision maker in the house, with them and decide like what you're going to do and write out a plan. If you follow up an email, you like basically try to really make the decision, because I think one of the problems we have when we're thinking about these hard questions is that we flip flop a lot because we haven't structured our decision making. So we ask, well, how do I fix sleep? And then we're like, oh, my friend told me like, if you knock him on the head 3 times and give him some Benadryl, let's try that for tonight. Or, well, we're going to tell him, we're going to read him this story and try that. More stuffed animals. Like we're just sort of trying things.
Yeah.
Or we're kind of constantly flipping between stuff. And that doesn't work for consistency with kids. And it doesn't give us an opportunity to articulate what we're trying to accomplish and what do we need to get there. So do these in the steps, get to the final decision. And then there's a follow-up step. So that's the 4th step. I think very few of our decisions are ones that we cannot reevaluate. So I tell people it's hard to reevaluate your decisions because you don't want to have been wrong.
Oh, yeah.
So people don't like to be wrong.
Well, and part of your final decision step two should also be how we're going to decide, how we're going to
Exactly.
judge progress or
Yep.
success against what we've defined as our goal here.
Exactly. So we want to have like, okay, we're going to, and when are we going to do that? So when are we going to revisit this?
What's our
It's not going to
timeline?
be tomorrow. We need to give it enough time, but not infinite time. So, what we're going to track this for 2 weeks. And at the end of 2 weeks, we're going to ask, how is it going? Do we want to revisit some aspect of what we're doing? So giving something sort of enough time to percolate the decision, but give ourselves an opportunity to for sure revisit it is the fourth step. So
Yeah, and not too much time. Yeah, you want
and
to.
not in the case of sleep, not too much time.
Yeah, because you want to say how are things going and what can we do different if this plan we have in place isn't actually working.
There's always a balance in these things about like how long do you want to give a decision while you just sort of I make the decision, I leave it, and I let it sort of play out. You want to give it enough time to play out, but not so much time that you can't tweak things.
Yes, yes. Well, and I just love this concept because I think a lot of times in whether it's parenting decisions or just like, I don't know, how we're going about our life, I feel like so much of what we do is just kind of like on autopilot or reactive. And so I just love this idea. And we try to do family meetings too, but I love this idea of like really thinking about being intentional about this issue that we're having and like having a clear step-by-step way to tackle it, because I think it makes people feel empowered when you have like, I'm going to follow this process, like here's how we're
Yes.
going to do this.
I also think this is an opportunity to get on the same page with your partner. I mean, we talked a little bit about like conflict around these issues, and some of that conflict arises when we haven't decided what we're going to do, and maybe we don't agree with it, or we just both have like a different idea we never talked about, and one of us is doing one thing and one of us is doing another thing,
Yeah.
and we both think it's right. I mean, all of my most significant fights with my husband in our entire like 20-year relationship were like the first year of my daughter's life, when like neither of us knew what we were doing, and we both thought that we knew like the other person was an idiot like some fraction of the time, because you're just like, you're so engaged, you're so tired, and then they're doing it wrong.
Yeah, of course.
So I think these kind of structured processes are a way to be like, okay, well, what are we trying to fix? Like, let's agree. And then if somebody says, well, I don't think it's a problem, okay, well, that's an opportunity to talk about like, why do we disagree about whether this is a problem, or why do we disagree about the way we're going to have the solution? And then you kind of work through it in a moment that you're not exhausted and fighting.
Yeah.
Hopefully get to a plan that you can then implement as a team.
Yeah, totally. Because I think especially when in a sleep deprived house, a lot of times it's one parent is stuck in the room with the kid from 9 o'clock until 11:30, and then they're like sneaking out, and then they're exhausted and they're going to bed. So in lots of families, the parents are like two ships, like literally passing in the night, right? It's like, okay, you've got the night shift tonight, you've got the bedtime shift tomorrow, and you're kind of just trading off responsibilities. And then I think what you're talking about happens, and this is what happened in my family, which was like when my daughter was rebelling against sleep and not refusing to stay in her toddler bed when we'd moved her to her bed, I'm like, okay, well, I'll just stay. I'm like, I'll stay with you for, until you fall asleep. I didn't know what I was doing. And my husband's like, no, I'm not wasting my time in there. And so we're both trying to do different things, which was frustrating between the two of us for sure, but also totally inconsistent for my daughter's experience, right? So then she doesn't know what to expect. And then she's like more upset because dad won't stay. And then he's pissed at me because I'm staying. I don't want to be staying. So it's inconsistency for the kid too, and the marital stress. It's all like a big cyclone of,
cyclone of
horrible
badness.
Feelings. Yeah. So I really like this idea of taking this time to like be intentional. And you talk about this one thing, you call it the one thing in your book, which is not even necessarily about sleep, but just taking this time at the change of a season to just spend a minute, like just over dinner one night, talk to your husband about, hey, what's like not working?
Yeah. What's the most, and because I think I have these, in this book, The Family Firm, there's this like whole structure for like getting your family together, which I think is very helpful about setting values and mission statements and stuff, but it's a fair amount of work. And I try to like I think that there's a simple thing that people can do to try to improve how their family functions, which is exactly to just ask this question, like, what's the one thing that's like really bothering me?
Yeah.
Like, and I just sort of like, we often have, it's like, this is just, it's like an itch. Like every day I'm like, ah. You know, so, and some of these are people have shared, like, they're very small. They're like, Minnie told me, like, every day, every afternoon, we let these two people both work from home. Every afternoon, we would argue about who had to go down the street to pick up our kid from daycare. And like, it was just disruptive. Like somebody had to take it. And every afternoon we'd be like, I'm in the middle of something. They said, like, we just, at the beginning of the week, we started on Sunday deciding who would do that.
Right.
And that was it.
Yeah.
And then it was like a totally small thing. They ended up doing the same amount of work, you know, splitting it in half like they had before, but just not fighting about it. Yeah. And that was something, it's like, you just think about it, you're like, oh, well, there's really no reason we have to decide this in the moment when we're angry every day. Let's just decide it on Sunday. And so I think sometimes when we articulate the one thing, it's bigger. It's like, my kid isn't sleeping in their own bed at night for the whole night and they're not getting out of sleep. That's a hard thing to fix.
Yeah.
But it is good to say, this is a problem. Like, this is bothering us. We need to invest in fixing it.
Yes.
Even if it's big.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's small.
Or maybe just admitting, you know what? Neither of us are happy with the situation that's going on with sleep. Like, we don't want it to be like this. We need to do something different, but we don't have the capacity or the mental energy to do that right now. But we're going to talk about this again in a couple weeks. Yeah. And if it is a priority, then we're going to tackle it. I think even just talking about it, because I think sometimes these things go unspoken, or the mom will hold like resentment against like the spouse for not carrying even the mental load of worrying about or understanding how big of a problem this is. So just bringing it up and coming up with a plan to tackle it, I think is genius. And
makes you feel not crazy.
What?
Already makes you feel not crazy. I think sometimes it's like, I'm thinking about this, and just to say it out. Yeah, we're both really struggling. Like, this is hard. Like, we got to fix it. Maybe we can't do it today, but just saying that can be so freeing.
Yeah. And it makes you feel like a team again, which is the
really
goal.
important.
Well, awesome. Well, this has been such a great conversation. Tell everybody where they can find you. And
yes, you can find me at ParentData.org, which is where you can sign up for our newsletter and peruse all of these topics on the website. And you can find me on Instagram at Prof. Emily Oster.
All right. Well, and like I said before, ParentData is such a great community. There's so much good information in there. So hope everybody goes and checks you out over there.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Emily.